Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Pete. And I'm excited that we're joined today by Meredith Reilly. So why don't you give a little intro and we'll get to
Yeah.
know her.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Meredith. Meredith is a client, I guess you could say, at isolved, the chief sales officer. Someone that I get to work with a bit on my advisory work and work on what's going on in the HCM space down market. And just excited to have her, man. So welcome, Meredith.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Both of you.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some great conversations out in Scottsdale. I was like, you got to come on and talk about what's going on out there. So
Not a
great to
bad
have
place
you.
to be in the conversation either.
I know. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
I'm sure. Sunny, probably. Hey, listen, I think you know the drill because I know you're familiar with us. So we always like to start to know how the heck you got into HR, payroll, and this whole space and what makes you stay.
I haven't heard one person on your show, by the way, say that was planned. So we've all fallen into this thing somehow. To go back and then shorten the journey, I actually was in school to be a teacher and was about to go do that whole game in New York State, and then saw at
Mm.
the time a bunch of my friends, working at daycares and those types of functions, or art on a cart or whatever that was in districts, and went, oh. At the same time, I was coaching, and I'm like, working for this landscaping company doing estimates. And I'm like, there's something else out there that takes the ability to communicate, break things down to other people, actively listen, right? Like something else has to happen with skill sets here that maybe has a different financial and professional outcome. And at the time, I was in the land of a pretty big backyard of corporate hometown at a HCM company I worked for a long time, and went, maybe I should go do that. And I found them. It was just crazy to think of today at like a trade show to try and see if I could telemarket for them. Like 26 years old. Can I go be a telemarketer for you? And they're pretty much like, yes, please. So I found myself there, and that became this big cycle of, it was so crazy to me that at the time it's a very different landscape of trying to convince people to, like, let us do your EFTPS or something. Like nobody talks about that today, but it just felt like this unique place to help folks accomplish something. And everybody had to pay an employee, and everybody had to figure out what that meant as soon as you were going to pay an employee, from compliance to you name it. So ended up doing that, starting there. Been in the industry over 15 years, made my way up through sales and sales teams and overlay strategic teams all the way through kind of this position today. So it's been a wild journey, but again, happened upon me. First, maybe it was carved out. I'd like to give those student loans back, by the way. That'd be really nice, but we'll get there.
Hey, though, but you did kind of target the logo anyways, just by
Yeah.
chance they were in your
Yeah.
hometown and you were like,
Yeah.
oh, how about you?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more, that sounds more deliberate than I needed a job. So
Yeah.
that's what most people say. It's like, I was, I had to do
Like, we
something.
need to pay the bills.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Look, I want to talk to you about how things have changed over the years, because I know it has. I want to get your lens on that from the sales side. But, our good friends on the Work to Find Network, Tim Sackett, HR Famous podcast, he once said, I think he posts a meme or something he has on this, about how no one's ever buying HR technology. You're actually always selling it, right? You got to really sell it. And I think that's very true. Like it's work to sell these things and to sell solutions that seem so obvious, to most of us, especially the practitioner. But do you think that that's true? Do you think it is that you're always selling it? It's never really being bought, so to speak.
I do agree with that. I would say
Yeah.
the immediate response would agree that it's a little hard coming from my lane, where it's been, like close to 20 years selling it.
Yeah.
But even when you're selling it, the buying community, I don't know if they feel like they're buying.
Yeah.
Like you put yourself in the seat of buying something. I don't know if they outright feel like a buyer, to be honest. I think
Yeah.
that they feel like they're trying to accomplish things, can't accomplish things. There's obstacles, there's opportunities. Like, but I don't know if they sit down at the table and go, "We're buying."
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's
Well,
weird
and
because
truthfully, sometimes they don't, right, Pete? Our very first maiden episode was the do nothing buyer, I think we called it.
I've been
They
yeah.
don't know.
I've been a part of as a solution architect, as many deals failed as or more than made it, right? For that very reason. But yeah, it's just such a weird conundrum in our industry that it's hard to explain to other people. And oddly, it seems so obvious that you need technology and you need services and you need help, and buyers know it, and then they go out there and they get paralyzed and lost in the sauce, as I like to call it, and then do nothing and spin out, right? And then 5 years later they're going down the same RFP road again or whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. But how has it changed over these years for you, Meredith?
It feels like that you just described is,
Yeah.
only taking more legs, and, it's it's almost like buyers, even if they didn't call themselves buyers, we're used to these salespeople showing up in our industries with a process, and they'd have a couple maybe things on their wish
Mhm.
list or whatever it was, and we could pull out pain and solve for it and give them a recommendation, and today, I think there's been a lot of changes in our industry. There's also a lot of fatigue, I feel like, in our industry
Yeah.
from a product and a buyer and a customer standpoint, tech that's been overpromised, underdelivered to the service, inconsistencies. It's just an interesting one. And then you go to buyer positions have also tweaked a little bit, where maybe a CHRO was leading the charge before. Some of those folks are a little less experienced today, and they're finding that they're maybe even in their own organization not being treated as strategic.
Yeah.
That's like, let's look at it more from the ROI or the financial side of the house, or the CIOs and CTOs are part of the process and have their fingerprints on it today because of AI. And it's just an interesting landscape where I think collectively they're going, we don't really know, but we're gonna
Yeah.
maybe create our own process that'll take 72 more steps than usual. It's almost like when you're playing Mario and you have to, like, beat Bowser, as a salesperson. I feel like you think that you beat Bowser, but really it was just, like, the level before you
Yeah.
made a fire pit, and here we are somewhere else.
Yep.
But our processes and not at my own company, but kind of collectively together as, a sales force have had to shift too, and if you're not shifting, I don't even know if you'll help all those participants that all want a seat, that all have a laundry list of things they're trying to accomplish, which sometimes are competing and
Yeah, yeah.
conflicting internally, come out with something. At the end, they come out and go, we're just going to stay where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
ultimately what they want. And one of the biggest tells that I've noticed is even in a smaller size company, it doesn't matter if you're mid market, SMB, a lot of them are going to boards to help them make decisions. And boards, this isn't usually
Crazy.
something they've been in on before. It's wild. The
Yeah.
statistics we have on board involvement for buying HR tech is wild.
What's driving that, do you think? Especially at the
I
smaller
think
market.
I think there's 2 pieces. One of them is financial and the way
Mhm.
that it's being treated of a financial spend, the strategic spend, and the other one is a bit about that technology and security piece. So they're
Mm.
going, somebody almost like a grown up with all of us needs to help us make those careful decisions and or as an organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see more IT involvement then?
Yeah, and it's hard too because there's different ranges of that, but even things with AI, knowing the vendors that you're using and
Mhm.
the transparency and the audits and, what they care about with the way they're gonna go with their tech, but you're basically opening yourself up to something a lot bigger even as a small organization when you use another vendor, so it just feels
Yeah.
like a lot of that has also crept into the space where I do feel like most buyers, by the way, aren't necessarily like have a full AI strategy themselves and are
Mm.
power users. They know that they're supposed to be asking and looking for these things, but they might not necessarily have that clarity on what it's supposed to translate into.
Yeah.
Meredith, you were saying there's a tell about whether they might be ready to engage. And I'll tell as an advisor in this space, so I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest tells that I hear repeatedly from the different vendors and solutions in the market is if an advisor is involved, they're serious.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
it also brings a
Yeah.
process in the beginning and a middle and an end. I mean, it's got to be so challenging to go through. Sometimes, it's just demo land to a decision, which is great if you're the only guy who's doing the demos, right? But it
Yeah.
also doesn't provide a great foundation for what it is they've bought and setting the expectations and understanding exactly how to make that successful. So it ends up being, I think, a lot more work on the delivery side just because you short circuit some of the beginning, middle, and end of a process.
Yeah. These aren't, to your point, like your community, the folks that are helping guide them through it with the process is really helpful because I think that's one of the we've lost the plot scenarios is they've gone, well, this hasn't worked. We've been with one, two, three, four 16 other providers and we're not getting, X, Y, and Z. So let's create our own process. And that's a little bit scary because again, it's almost
Yeah.
like trying to be an expert in a space you're not,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
when you have to guide you through it and shared outcomes, and again, there's people would just buy online if they didn't need the salespeople. Like they need somebody to empathize and actively
Yep.
listen and to translate things for them. Hopefully we do
Well,
that,
and look,
right?
if you've been through like 1, 2 316, like you say, then like maybe you're part of the problem, you know? I
You said
hate to
it.
say it, but
No, that never happens.
that's
You
why
know,
I'm
you know,
wildly popular with clients.
Yeah.
They love to hear me say.
we were on a call recently that I thought brought up a pretty good topic where somebody had kind of shouted out, especially when you guys go through these demos and these
Mhm.
processes, that people will leave a company over service and then buy again on like tech and user experience. It's
Yep.
hard. You're selling a non-tangible item, right? When you think about
Yeah.
it, until that company is actually delivering against the service and the tech and the strategies, and you're starting to see something from it, what you are selling, you can show as many demos as you want, is not a tangible product where you can
Mhm.
pick it up, feel really good about it, and then walk away with it. And you have different strategies you're going to run with. It's a big thing that you're buying, but
Yep.
the service, who's going to show up for you, is a really big part of that process that feels like it gets taken out of it because you're looking for the tangible things that the human psyche can vet,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
come up so much.
Yeah, that customer experience has become incredibly important now, and everybody says they differentiate on that, and they have to, I think, especially going forward. Um,
Imagine
but
if
it's
they
like, how
didn't.
do you demonstrate that, right? I mean, how do you it's hard. It's really, really hard, and I think I've said this many times, you guys have caught lightning in a bottle, and now
Yeah.
your challenge is scaling that. Your customers
It's
really, really do love what you guys do there, but how do you maintain that, in this new world and keep
so
that
hard because you
continuity? You know what
have
I mean?
yeah. You have to hit the human psyche too, because there is a part of that.
Mhm.
Because if you just came and said the same thing to every person, whether that's true about your company or not, it only lands a certain way. So you are having to trust that salesperson, but then the proof points, that's the other part. So you have to appeal to the emotional journey of the buyer, empathize, understand what they care about. Some of those big pain points where a company has not delivered service are very real,
Yeah.
and you have to get those out on the table so that you're aligned with expectations. I would wanna be the first person to say, "Whoa, like, maybe we're not a fit for you because of X, Y, and Z, but let's talk about what the actual expectation is, what we would be delivering as the reality is." But then those credentialed proof points, from references to testimonials to case
Mhm.
studies to analysts to, the users, the customer journey, are the other things that you're trying to insert into a very tech focused process so that the people can understand on the other side the actual service component. Because even in our space, it's like, upper SMB mid-market, if you
Mhm.
wanna call it that. When you have 3,000 employees, you still want a person.
Yeah.
When you're like enterprise, maybe it's a little bit different at that point. You're
Yep.
actually still looking for the human that you are working with the company, the way the company responds and cares about you, and that's probably one of the harder things to land in the sales environment than go through a series of demos and show how the tech works.
Yeah, that is, and it is hard to, as your partner, respond when things aren't going well, right? Or, the nose on the plane dips a little. What do we do? That sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Julie, I think back to our podcast with Margaret about the buyer who or the company who had changed systems 3 times in 5 years, something like that. That
I have
just
a couple
seems
of my own like that.
absurd to me. That has to be such a cost of just resources over all that time and change and confusion. I just don't understand some of that flippant changing. Is it that easy, Meredith, to change? Do you feel too
It's
easy?
I do think it could be easier to change than people would perceive, but one of the
Yeah.
problems happening more now with prevalence that makes that harder is, let's say you vet something, you all carefully go, okay, this is the right one for us, and then their leadership changes. And
Mhm.
now this new HR, insert the blank on the title
Yeah.
changes, but they have a different preference, different experience. They weren't
Yep.
there in the buying process and don't have the same emotional connection,
Right.
workflow, what might be. And they're going, the solution is going to be to look again. So
Yeah.
we would rather I'd rather have optimization or make people power users and give people
Yeah.
like how it works best. But that is one of the things that is fought constantly in this industry is as soon as leadership tweaks, they go, okay, it must be the HCM company that we need to tweak as well.
Yeah.
I think part of it is too just like what is that buy process, right? So when I see a three strikes, like going on the third round in 3 years or 5 years, oftentimes I find that the personality leading the search because they're smaller organizations that we're talking about generally. So you're not talking a huge organization. that person might do a series of demos and really truly vet the pain points that they have, but that's it, right? It's demos and a personality, and they get themselves into something. And then the second time around, it's usually like, okay, well, that wasn't great. Let me actually do a better job of picking, and they do a better job of picking, but they don't put any emphasis on the deployment. And
Yeah.
so, if you're just stuffing it in at that point in time, now I've got a second thing and it's not great either because I didn't do a great job of, setting it up and making it for
Or
me. And the
or
third time, it's just
shopping
like
around
you have
use
to get more
cases.
and more mature every time and brings a little bit of additional rigor, or you're just going to be swapping things out, like you said, 16 times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they really have to think about their use cases, in detail.
Yeah, the time spent on that plan, like, if you entertain a company that's like, "We're doing it all," you're like, "Okay, there's probably gonna be work share
Mhm.
across, the fence there." It's a two-way street. But that is a really big part of it that I do see people are buying off feature functionality, they're buying off they like the rep, they like the demo, but getting in there and using it and the implementation process
Mm.
of how we actually get this to be up and running, traditionally people are going to start with the payrolls, the times because it's most sensitive, it's project, centered to pay people, and then everything else turns into back burner. Well, that's like that plan is really important and the
Yeah.
the key strategic items have to stay part of the key strategic items. And then again to the earlier point, if the person that shifted in that time comes in and there's a new seat, that is probably one of the most dangerous times I think to change that staff is when
Mm.
you've only set up one time and you haven't started to chip away at anything else.
Yeah.
Well, I have an interesting question because it's something I'm seeing more and more as we really do move to critical mass and beyond with SaaS, and that is an insistence in the buy process that the services descriptions are, boilerplate templates, and this is what you're buying. And yet, in the RFP process, you're focused on everything but. And so that doesn't become a huge deal until you get to contracting later on. And then it's like, well, we won't change the contract language that says this is what you're buying, and we won't like, are you seeing some of that play out in this space, especially if we call it, I don't know if you call it SMB space, but
Yeah, SMB mid-market, right?
yeah.
For sure, because every HCM company calls it something a little bit different. Like how many
Mhm.
products have the word workforce in it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Workforce is this.
It's
So
crazy.
it
Yeah.
is really hard for that fatigued community to try and figure out what are we actually getting with this? What are we actually getting with that? Comparing the two things. And then you make a selection and realize later, oh, that wasn't part of that.
Yeah.
So I do think our buying community would prefer that we all speak similar languages so they can almost like, evaluate for themselves, but pin us against each other a little bit because
Mhm.
calling it apples over here, calling it oranges over there with a little bit the difference is there's also degrees of what each company does,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
their deliverables,
Yeah.
their technology, their services. But that is very confusing for folks to try and figure out what are they actually getting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always hated that HR and payroll services and tech has always been kind of commoditized in some way in the mind of the buyer versus looking at it for the ROI that it can, obviously provide in so many different ways. But so Meredith, I want to ask you this. We had a great workshop. We ran a great workshop the other day that you were in with the
Yeah.
brokers community in isolved, and I know you guys go to market very heavily through your indirect channels
Yeah.
with your centers of influence. But one of the things that obviously came up in there, and I brought it up. We talked about it, and it comes up a lot. I see across the market, and especially with my global clients, where they're being asked to do more than what they did in the past. Right? They're being asked to do something adjacent, or something for a population in a place that they normally wouldn't, because the client needs help. Right? And we've certainly talked a lot about the fact that there is this rise in complexity. There's this shrinking of talent. So I think there's just this seeking for help. Do you see that happening as well, as a provider in your world? Do you see a pull of taking you into new lanes?
Oh, big time. I mean, especially when you look at community, we had the broker community, right? Take accountants, the brokers,
Mhm.
any type of trusted advisor. It was a very different land for them even a few years ago.
Yeah.
Their subject matter expert field when you take a broker is benefits and running a benefit plan that makes sense for, their customer, the employer that's going to engage with employees, and they have kind of common shared goals there. But then all of a sudden, the landscape of what it looks like to employ people, to be an
Yeah.
employer. The shifting demand goes, okay, well, now the thing that's in the middle of my bag as a broker is pretty expensive benefits, right? That's not getting cheaper, it's going up. And who's looking at them to be the holder of that? Their customer and their prospective customer. And you look at the demands of trying to run a benefits plan for 5 generations in a workforce, and what pharmacy plans like GLP-1. There's all these things that have come up where you're like, wow, the world has changed. Benefits are still in the
Yeah.
middle, but the customer is actually looking for me to play a much bigger role in other things that is not my subject matter area of
Right.
expertise.
Right.
And if I don't do that, I'm commoditized to just someone with an expensive benefits
Or
plan.
my competition will.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Or someone will. So you're seeing brokers have to navigate the world differently. Same thing for other types of, trusted advisors. And that's where I think that nice Venn diagram between, someone like an HCM partner and provider and a broker can have a pretty big strategic play to help their customers to go, here's the things we focus
Mhm.
on. Here's what you do. When they ask, like you think about a broker, how many rooms would they want to be in with an HR person
Yeah.
to all the little things that creep up that actually would be part of something they could help deliver, but they're
Yeah.
not going to know if they're not in the room, right? But we might be in the room at that point. So there's this, it's hard because you don't want to figure out, my day job is this. Let me figure out and be someone else's
Yeah.
job. When you can have that co-shared experience, you're going to deliver a lot better result for the customer who desperately needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Great point. Julie, do you see that a lot? Do you see
I
RFPs creeping into different lanes that they weren't?
I do for sure. I mean, as you know, Heron Palmer is owned by Brown and Brown, so
Yep.
a large part of our company is broker and works especially in the same size market space, right? So we have a lot of internal relationships as well that help inform us on exactly where are the brokers getting involved and where aren't they. I would tell you that I think you see many large brokers actually having some core capabilities in the HCM advisory space
Mhm.
because of that. I think the biggest challenge is just what is the model to bring that to a company because companies aren't used to, they're used to having their broker just do things for them, right? And it's kind of like all looks free to them.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not exactly, it's just a whole different model than it is to be looking at the breadth of hire to retire things that are not benefits, right? So it's a step further than most brokers are willing to, learn and have that in-house intelligence because it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Meredith, is there anything on your bingo card for 20 or not on your bingo card for 2026 that's kinda come up? You're like, didn't see that coming in terms of the marketplace
I
requests
don't
or whatever?
I think it's elongating in general. I think it's become more complex not to be just a salesperson, but again, to
Yeah.
be the buyer. So I think the big thing for my bingo card, I think about my role, my reps, is to quiet the noise a bit for everyone. Like,
Yeah.
how do we run really good processes where whether we come out the winner or the loser, however you want to say it, we've heard and covered the things appropriately in a good amount of time? Because I realize that, well, we could be asked to do our 17th demo for some executive
Yeah.
presentation. The people on the other side, that's painstaking for them as well.
Oh, yep.
And that order taking demand, like there's just an interesting spot to hit right now where we could hit it right, where we have the right amount of time spent on the reps, but we're also taking the buyer through something that feels good for them and all questions asked and stones unturned, and they have a really
Yeah.
good decision, whatever that decision is at the end. That's the big thing that's come up. And when boards came into that conversation, that was a big indication to me that they are seeking outside help for something that we should be able to help them make pretty confident decisions on.
Look, when
Yeah.
buyers do
Yeah.
nothing, oftentimes it's just a timing thing,
Yeah.
right? So something needs to happen. How long you can do without that
Yeah.
thing is one thing or the other. But I think that's really important, and just knowing that do nothing is a legit outcome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that nothing's going to happen. Buyers love being educated. Most
Yeah.
do. If you can take them through a process and they learn things that they didn't know before, then you have provided, measurable value to them, I think, and
Informed
that's appreciated.
decisions feel great. No matter
Yeah.
what that decision is, to be honest, you wanna win as many as you can in sales, but that's not how it's gonna work. An informed decision, I wanna make sure it's not something that's a tired decision where everybody walks away going, "I don't know." But,
I'm
you
just
know
exhausted. Just
yeah,
let's
you want
drop
it
it.
to be informed and that you feel like you're, heard, listened to, and you have the information you need to figure out whatever that decision is. That would be the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So Meredith, we definitely got to talk AI, right? I mean, what are you hearing? Yeah, what are you hearing amongst your customers just for how they're looking at it in their businesses, let alone HR? But like, what are you hearing just in around the water cooler, so to speak?
Well, I think AI in itself as a conversation that hits employer and employee,
Hmm.
populations kind of has a bad PR for itself in that it is the equal of some sort of like full time equivalent reduction, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of times you see people coming in being like, we want to, be more efficient and effective and leverage AI. And that's the only sentence. And they think that that means, well, we have to deploy AI in some sort of way to reimagine our workforce to have less headcount,
Yeah,
which means there's a savings. And that's not like really right now. The way that it sits is AI is like having a great extra set of hands as humans to help humans do certain elements of work and
yeah,
outsource things that they don't do great. So that's kind of what people come to us with is the thought already there. And you have to shift that to, well, what if we just have better data, better analytics, better proactive moments for you to better make better decisions. If there's
yeah,
functions that you don't have to spend time on because your time should be spent somewhere else, not necessarily like, yeah, you can remove, 100 people from your workforce. That makes sense. Right. So I think that's a little bit of what's happening is they don't know. They're just being told by
They don't
and
yeah,
yeah.
world that that means that they should be removing people from their organization, and that's not quite the case.
yeah. A
Well,
lot of
and look,
hype.
aren't companies enforcing that by, blaming every downsizing or treating it to AI? So whether that's true or not, in many cases, it's probably not a direct
Yep.
a direct correlation. They're reinforcing the message that's there to be had
Yeah.
quick and easy.
Yeah. I would argue too, it depends on the sector and the business too, because
Yeah.
I've met some
Mhm.
organizations that are just completely aggressive, small businesses, right? Mid market that are really going after it from an AI perspective. And then I've met others that are very slow and reluctant, right? I met a law firm that they a little bit in denial, I would think. But if I had to measure what the way the conversation went, but maybe that's just that one lawyer. But the point
Yeah.
is, it's interesting to see the spectrums of
Yeah.
maturity and adoption. But how's the conversation with AI in their HR tech going in terms of the buy side? Are you seeing a lot of engagement in terms of like proactively, or are they kind of just inquisitive? Or
I think demanding it is the table stakes at this point. If you don't have AI already in your product that you
Mhm,
can talk about and enhancements on your roadmap, you're not even really being considered. Again, whether their internal knowledge of how to use that is strong or not, it
mhm.
is almost like when you think about the SEO thing, if AI isn't popping up all over the place, they're probably not even going to consider you as a vendor. So it's almost baseline. Hey, you should have really cool AI features, right? And you're like, okay, yes, but where I think it's coming up more and more is there's also that fear about the security. So we're getting a lot more of the requests for, the information that would be held from your trust centers. Or, what do you guys do with that information? Things even that will come up of, hiring and onboarding. Are you using AI in a way that's compliant that has, DEI built into it or those types of a lot more of those entry level questions than maybe being further on the journey of really understanding what to ask for of how
Yeah.
AI in an HR product is going to help you as an organization.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I also think there's going to be an opportunity. I think there already is an opportunity for many of the vendors to support customers with change management in order to understand how to actually get the most out of these solutions in their work world. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for HR to actually lead that in the smaller companies because that might be one of the only back
Mhm.
office groups that have. And I'm sure finance may have it, but it could be one of the few that have a commercial grade AI solution that's working at scale against key processes. So,
Yeah, it's a great point because AI enters the tech buying forefront as feature functionality
yeah.
could actually be the item that keeps HR strategic in their
Yeah.
role, because that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed
Right.
to, how do you take care of your number one asset? And that's your people, right at
Yeah.
the end of the day. That landscape has changed for them to be, highly turned,
Mhm.
less experienced. I think it's like 3 years
Yeah.
experience in the workforce and, have all these disparate systems and, but really it's supposed to be strategic. And I think AI can help an HR organization and practitioner be much more strategic than they have in the past, versus maybe the way that the buyer is coming in asking us about AI. That's what we would like to show them,
Yep.
is that can actually run their people strategy with the right systems, but with AI in the middle, helping them accomplish that. It's not some nasty gram about here's all the people we're laying off because of full time,
Yeah.
you know?
Agreed, agreed. I hear you. Yeah, no, we gotta start thinking about these things. I think we haven't thought of for so long, I feel like so much of the HR and payroll technology buys have been about reducing costs. It's not been about elevating that practice for strategic value, and I think that's what we gotta get to. And you're right. If payroll and HR and benefits and all that can become a contextual layer, an orchestrated, insightful data-driven, output, I think you can see a lot of value in that if you're the right leader using that, engaging in that. Unfortunately, we just don't have everybody everybody there yet. But
We'll
how,
get it.
how I know, I hope. How are we making progress on some of the talent, more advanced strategic talent sort of capabilities in the smaller middle market? Because that's always been kind of, they're very focused on the meat and potatoes, kind of the blocking and tackling, payroll time benefits. And then oftentimes beyond that, it became very disparate as to what they invested in. But what do you see in that way in terms of talent and talent intelligence and that sort of thing?
I see it almost becoming more of a driving force. It's
Hmm.
expected that you have a really good HRIS and
Yeah.
and payroll, kind of those core elements. But the topics of the conversation are more driving decisions, and more of the demos are focused on how are you actually going to help us select and find the best
Mm.
talent to through those things in some way that's not, horrendous for internal teams, especially if we have multiple decision makers or, folks interviewing. How do we also combat against,
Hmm.
the bots and think this? It's a
Yeah.
whole world where I think the buying community feels a little bit more modular. Not that they don't want the whole solution, but they're going to look at one at a time and hope
Yeah.
to cover the rest with you. They don't want to have systems all over the place, but those talent focused systems feel like they are the entry point of what people are talking about today versus maybe being an afterthought that they were before. It's a need to
Yeah.
have.
That's great. That's good to hear. I mean, look, they got to compete for talent. They got to compete in the market just like everybody else. Just like the big companies are going to have to be more sophisticated about that. And good to see it's coming around. So, all right, look, Meredith, I know you're busy, and I'd love to keep talking to you, but let's maybe prognosticate a little bit here. Maybe predict, like, what are your thoughts on kind of how 26 looks? Any signals towards what we think about 27 is going to be like?
I
Is that
think
even possible?
it could be, but then, you throw it out there. I think it follows a bit of consumer confidence, right, at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So an 11-year low was the beginning of 2026 for many people. You throw a couple wars into it and you're
Yeah.
going, "Hang." So, I think we're starting to see buyers kind of perk back up. We're probably seeing them be a little bit more thoughtful in the way that the executive leaders want to be involved and boards
Hmm.
involved. And I do think there's a little bit of a new animal to deal with, but I do feel like maybe the period in which most HCM companies went through in quarter 1 is coming to the other side of it. But I do think the predictors will continue to be AI and having companies show up and show a clear AI thesis on how they're going to help organizations be strategic that isn't just reducing headcount. I think the predictors will continue to be around a lot of those talent
Hmm.
services, managed services, also coming up quite a bit. I think
Yeah.
companies could deliver on that as we reimagine the employer and employee workforce. And at the end of the day, I could be surprised that any day you wake up now. That's the new normal,
I
right?
know, I know, I know.
You could
No,
go,
I would agree. I would agree with all of that. And yeah, especially I would underline the managed services part of this. The complexity is going up, the talent is shrinking, the pool, and people are looking for help, for all the reasons we talked about, hey, can you do more? Can you do this? Can you do that here? Doing this there. I think that's going to rise, and I think it's going to lend itself to more tech adoption in order to enable all of that. So good stuff. Good, nice, healthy market on the horizon. So
And who doesn't like a little bit of surprise, right?
Yeah. Yeah, come on. Yeah.
Keep us on our toes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be HR if it wasn't, if it didn't change every
That's
day.
right.
Uh, but Meredith, will we see you at HR Tech? Where are we gonna see you next on the road? Anywhere?
I am not sure. I'm gonna be off the road for a little bit, welcoming a
Alright.
new one into our family, and then, probably back on the road later summer, so we'll see where
Yeah,
I show up. You'll have to
I
be
know.
surprised as well when I do walk in.
I love it, I love it. Well, congratulations on your new addition to you and your
Thank you.
family. And, yeah, hopefully we'll see you at HR Tech. And, where can folks connect with you? LinkedIn, I'm sure, but where
Yeah,
else?
I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best place for it. Come see us at, isolved. You can find me there, but LinkedIn's always easy.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it,
Sounds
Meredith. Maybe you
great.
should come back, make this an annual thing, and we'll
Let's
get an
do it.
update on what's going on out there.
Predictions for '27.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
love it. All right, thanks everyone. We'll be back soon with more content.